Hello, I'm Kat Howard. I'm assistant principal at the Dustin School, and I'm really excited to talk to you today for my session, which is entitled "Why Subject Knowledge Isn't Enough." So I appreciate that sounds a little bit contentious, but I think that we've worked really, really hard as a profession to put subject knowledge at the forefront of what we do. And maybe it's time to start thinking about what we can do next in that regard and how we can build on that a little bit. So I think it's really pleasing, and definitely some of the conversations that I've had with teachers and leaders over the last 12 months in particular, this ongoing trajectory we are on regarding high quality curriculum development in schools. I think that's really exciting. I think we've acknowledged the catch-up narrative, but with a focused view that we have this continued understanding of the principles of good teaching and learning, and that we know what helps our students to improve their outcomes, but also to improve their experience of the curriculum, experience of school as a whole. And that comes back to an understanding of best bets when it comes to evidence-informed teaching, but also an understanding of subject knowledge and ensuring that our teachers have the opportunity to be subject experts. I think we can all agree that that's a priority, and I think we've seen that reflected in the Ofsted framework, but also in local level and national discussions around what makes effective teaching. We know that subject knowledge is at the forefront. That's not necessarily anything new. Subject communities and subject level discussion, we understand, is key to continual improvement. We know that in order for subjects to really flourish, we can't just say that our teachers need to be subject experts. We need to enable them the time and the scope and high quality CPD that's really kind of informed and from a really well-intended place to make sure that they have the tools to teach. And so I think this is where we are currently at, that we have this number of incredible teachers within the profession with a real wealth of subject knowledge. And my thinking is really around how we can really utilise and tap into those expertise and skills. If we think about where we're at currently as a profession, there's been a huge influx this year for ITT, which is amazing to see, really pleasing to see. And thinking about kind of that increase of novice teachers coming into the profession, how can we make use of the expertise and the experience that we have, particularly at subject level? So I wanted to look at subject knowledge and subject expertise and how we can maybe refine our approach to that at a local level in schools. And I don't necessarily think this is something that's a huge strategic plan, but I do think that the way that we approach and kind of utilising the expertise within our staff bodies would be really quite powerful. Not just for subject knowledge, but for the teaching profession as a whole, when we're thinking about professional relationships. So I want to start by thinking about what experts are really, really good at. Beyond just being kind of experts of their subject, what is it that expert teachers do really well? And I appreciate this is a slither of those expertise and that definition. So I fully appreciate that I'm kind of paring this down slightly for the time constraints. If we think about what subject knowledge experts do really well, they don't just understand the subject in its entirety, but they understand how that subject is kind of dissected and reassembled into its component parts so that students understand it. So if you speak to a subject expert, for example, I'm a literature specialist, so my expertise aren't just of, I adore in spectacles, if anybody knows me, any substance, but my subject knowledge isn't just that I have a really thorough understanding of the play, it's that I have a really thorough understanding of the play and what that looks like within the context of a classroom. So I'm able to, with a sense of almost automaticity, and this is what subject experts do really well, is kind of predict and respond to areas where I know students are most likely to go wrong, and that's a practice and expertise in itself. So we're able to understand that the text or the subject or the component of the subject knowledge, what that looks like through the eyes of the student, and how we can really kind of make sure that is effective in the finite amount of time that we have in the classroom. The other thing that subject knowledge or subject experts we tend to come up against is that they lose the capacity to explain a particular process. It's curse of the expert. So we're really fantastic at this deepened understanding of our subject, but we're not necessarily, or we get worse at being able to explain it and make it explicit. So as we develop these subject expertise, what then happens is that we struggle to pass on that baton of knowledge. And I suppose that's my sticking point at the moment that I want to kind of get you thinking on, is how we pass on that baton of knowledge to novice teachers, because we don't want to massively overload them with lots and lots of information, but at the same time we don't want the expertise of our teachers that go on to retirement or leave the profession to be, you know, a Word document sitting on a unit of work that they created once on a shared drive. We really want to tap into their expertise and their experience, because they're a fantastic addition to the profession. So maybe here's a few ways that we can start thinking about how we do that. One is sharing about what we've learned about the interpretation of the subject by the student. So where am I having conversations with novice teachers about my experience of teaching a particular text or teaching a particular poem or teaching a particular way, where I've encountered, as I say, those kind of pitfalls, and I reacted and responded, or maybe I didn't at the time react particularly well, and I reflected and refined what I did so that the following year when I taught that poem or the following year when I taught that text, it looked very different. Where am I sharing those experiences with novice teachers and with a kind of subject level, to ensure that that information is passed on, that baton of knowledge is passed on, not necessarily subject knowledge, but knowledge of what it's like to teach the subject. The other thing that I think that expert teachers do really well is they have this understanding of discipline-specific teaching principles. And so, for example, I have a really thorough understanding of retrieval practice, of modelling, of questioning, of what makes an effective explanation, but I understand that my understanding of those is very much refined for an English classroom. Of course, I have an understanding to some degree of what that looks like in maths, in history, in science. However, my expertise really are modelling within the context, within the framework of the English classroom. And expert teachers, subject experts, are really fantastic at this. And so where are we collaborating at faculty level, at subject level, to actualise pedagogy, actualise the principles of teaching, but with a specific subject in mind? So are we delivering CPD on modelling, or are we now moving towards where we've got a series of mental models for particular subjects so that they're able to see that actually retrieval practice in maths, so it's completely different to retrieval practice in science, and so on and so forth. And those conversations are really important as we think about tapping into subject knowledge and subject expertise. Finally, because of the fact that we are confined to 10 minutes, I think it's really important that we think about how these conversations are going to take place, as well as what. So it might be the fact that you're thinking now, okay, I want to use some of my faculty time to really tap into these expertise and have conversations around, you know, experiences in the classroom of teaching a particular unit, or experiences in the classroom of particular teaching principles within the framework of my subject. That's going to be really powerful. We also need to think about how we orchestrate these conversations. So they need to feel collective. We need to transcend the hierarchy for these conversations, because that's really important, that we don't necessarily make anybody feel alienated or, you know, excluded from that process. It's a real kind of working as a collegiate to kind of temper through those problems. And we're not leading with a voice of authority, because that's going to come from a place of real psychological safety for everybody that's involved in the conversation. They need to be frequent, because the more that we have that conversation, if we're thinking back to my comment around subject experts, the more we have those conversations, the easier it's going to be to explain our processes, to be slightly metacognitive in, you know, how we go about things as subject experts, and get better at explaining it to people that might be slightly more novice than us. The other thing is really thinking about, well, how is this meaningful? And I don't necessarily mean that we need to put together an action plan. We need, you know, 2 or 3 targets to come away from those meetings or those conversations with. But how actually are we building up meaningful discourse that means that we are equipping our curriculum designers of the future to have those conversations? So whatever structure those conversations have, and how we go away, leaving them, there needs to feel a sense of reoccurrence. So we're not just saying, okay, we're going to have this one conversation about retrieval practice in English, and then we're never going to talk about it again. Actually, where do we involve everybody to say, next time we have this conversation about retrieval practice in English, what I'd like you to do is bring along your own examples and let's have a conversation and build upon what's working and share those experiences of our classroom and give you a snapshot, a lens into my classroom in the process. That will really help our curriculum designers of the future, which is what we're trying to build towards, is that they will then go away with a series of models that they can then use in future times to create these conversations around shared experience. So a few questions that I want to leave you with. Where can we make use of subject-specific experience and expertise? So where can we do that at a local level? And these are micro changes, but I would argue for quite significant impact. Where do we ensure that we tailor teaching and learning principles to the needs of the subject? We really need to pay attention to the nuance of the subject. I think it's really exciting where we've come so far, but now we need to think about, okay, subject level principles of teaching. How can we make sure that we're being mindful and paying service to the subject? And where do we work to make conversations around this work frequent and meaningful? So where are we really taking thought and care as to how those conversations need to look and how they need to be structured to make everybody feel involved in the process and everybody feeling as though they have something to contribute. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry it's a little bit of a whirlwind. I'm awful at sticking to time. You can find me on Twitter at Sesmis. I'd love to hear from you, either around the specific questions that I've raised or even just to bounce some ideas around. But thank you ever so much for watching. Take care.